Validus Capital as well. So if the three panelists can join, we can get started. So we'll just give them a minute to get on to the Zoom. I can see Sonal there. Hi.
Hello.
Welcome. Hi, Siang Hou. I can see you there as well.
Hello.
And we'll just give Vinay as well. Okay, I think we're all in. Fantastic. So I think this is a very, very interesting topic. Hyper-personalization, segment of one. Know me, serve me as I want to be served. It's that era. So I'm going to sort of start with the theme of hyper-personalization, data monetization. So I'll start with you, Vinay, and saying, what are you doing currently, and what results are you seeing from this whole hyper-personalized data monetization? What are your plans, especially for 2021, 22, in terms of partnerships, and what are you driving? So maybe you can give the audience some insights, please.
Sure. Thanks. Thanks for having me. Just a background on me. I'm part of the data management office for DBS Regional Data Management Office, and I'm responsible for driving the strategic agenda of driving analytics-based conversations with the customer, be it online or offline. Now, our journey around personalization started in the first half of the decade, and with the overarching vision of providing joyful experience to the customers. So that's when we kind of moved away from product push strategy to customer pull strategy. Now that has been the and that has brought the customer in the central as a central theme. Now, we have been building around our data assets, our centralized engine that will engage the customers on scale, putting together things like customer 360 view of a customer, then a decisioning engine that we have been working towards that will help us consume the feedback coming from different channels, and at the same time taking decisions on the fly. And now these are the things that then apart from that, most important thing that I see has been bringing, or rather streamlining or re-engineering the processes that has been that has to do with the traditional way of engaging the customer. So we are working a lot towards re-engineering the entire process, and then implementing this strategy. Now the thing is, how has this been performed? What has been the performance and all? So I would say it has been quite well. As you see in past, DBS has won best bank, best digital bank, and that has been the kind of performances, if I may say, on a company level. So yeah, that's the initial thought, and that's what we have been trying to put together.
I think that's great. I think and looking at it from consumer perspective, I am a customer of DBS, so I can tell you there are all elements of personalization I do see through. So let's hand over to Sonal. Your organization is more kind of B2B, right? You're more focusing on the SMB sector. So what are you doing, in terms of those activities? What are you seeing as results and your plans as well, please?
Sure. So just a quick context on Validus. So we are a P2P platform in the space of SME lending in the ASEAN region. And we started off in Singapore and expanding to other markets, Vietnam and Indonesia being the other two markets where we are focusing on currently as well. And if you look at how the P2P business model is, there are, first of all, two sets of customers for us, the SMEs who we lend to, and the investors from where we get the money for lending. So our, I'm glad we're talking about personalization or hyper-personalization, because it's very central to how we operate as a business model, for a company like us. Customer, when I talked about customer pull, and that is really the foundation on which we have designed our business model. It is driven largely through anchors or partners who we work with, which ensures that we have a better understanding of the SME, and we have a better information pool to reach out to the SME with more relevant products as opposed to a cold call. And I think that really has been a defining strategy for a company like ours, and we have seen the best results in that channel and arena. And as a focus going forward, it will be to really, fulfill that with more investment as a company, so that we can see and reap better results and profits from that. And this is on the investor side, this is another aspect for us, because we talk about SMEs and products being relevant for SMEs, and that it continues to be the main theme and focus. But even as an investor, how do we ensure that we are reaching out to people with the right set of understanding of what they would like to invest in, and really creating the tools for them to be able to classify different facilities or loans in our case, so that they are more comfortable in ensuring that their investments are happening with accurate information and transparency. So that's another aspect of where we focus on through auto invest strategies. So as a business for us, that will continue to be the theme, where we will continue to ride on understanding our investors and SMEs better.
That's great. Thanks, Sonal. I think gives a really deep insight into what's happening in that sort of what I call the smaller segment of the SMB and how we are approaching it. So let's switch gears to Siang Hou. I mean, I think you're more B2B to E, if I recall in our kind of pre-briefing, and very interesting how you're approaching it. So maybe you could set some insights as well, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So indeed, when we think of our customers, there are sort of like two big groups we deal with, right? So one of them is definitely the doctors, right? Because a lot of the therapies that we offer are being prescribed by the doctors, right? So there's no sort of direct to patient sort of distribution that we can do. So from that point of view, definitely I think getting all the scientific evidence about our therapies to the doctors is like a very key part of our overall customer engagement model. But we also do, very, I think, especially more recently, right, proactively try to, I think, educate the consumers of these therapies, right? Especially, I think, in the space of vaccines, where, decisions or the product are a lot more discretionary, right? Because it's not essential that the patients, right, or the consumers go for them. They have sort of like a choice that they can make themselves. So from that point of view, absolutely, right? We try to do both, right? Doctors and the consumers. And it's really all about, trying to get the right content, right, through the right channel at the right time to these two groups that we're talking about. And how that happens is essentially first and foremost having to understand what is the decision-making process, right? What are the key drivers of the choice that either the doctors or the consumers themselves make eventually. And then to map sort of all the messages, all the content, all the channels that we have against that. Then identify like the right metrics that would help us measure the effectiveness to enable sort of like a test and learn cycle that we just keep iterating through, right? So that while in flight, we can continually optimize our campaigns and keep getting better in our customer engagement. So that's, I guess, like one aspect of the hyper-personalization that has manifested in the company. But also, I would just like to highlight that it's not just external facing. A lot of our efforts are internal facing as well. So especially, like when we're talking about how to help our employees get better, right? So can we, use, I guess, like the data that we have, get insights on how better to coach individual employees, match them to, the next roles that they should move into, and, help support their career development more. So those are also, like other more internal facing, I guess, like efforts and ways in which we're trying to use data, right, to sort of just personalize, I think, what we give each person that we deal with, like in the company or externally as well.
No, it's fantastic. I'm just seeing some questions come through, so I want to break through here and maybe get one question. For Customer 360 view, should we get our reference data sorted out first before enriching with transactional and streaming data? I think, when you talk about hyper-personalization, one of the things is that 360 view, right? So that you can really go down to the individual, really understand them. So maybe I'll throw this to you, Sonal. What is your view on, how do you kind of prioritize, right? I mean, to get to the outcome, what the nirvana is, and that's what everybody's aspiring, hyper-personalization world. For 360 view, what is your view?
Yeah. So I in my previous roles in other companies, I think the bigger organizations do suffer from legacy platforms and silos much more. It becomes, as we have progressed in the field of data analytics and leveraging information, the legacy continues, and that shift becomes very difficult. And it comes with time, but it comes with a lot of change management, which is company-wide and hard to kind of fulfill at the pace one would like. But being in a startup now, I think that startups are much more nimble. They don't have the legacy issues. So 360-degree view is something that a lot of us would begin building our foundation capabilities on, because with the new age information, that is something that we realize is an important aspect. So I think for that, the focus on building the right foundation capabilities come handy as we start leveraging that more and more today.
That's great. Just to round up that response, and I might just throw it over to you. I mean, I don't know whether you term yourself a completely new digital native bank or a combination of a legacy plus digital. I really don't know how to kind of frame it, but what is your kind of add-on to what Sonal was just referenced there?
Yeah, I think what Sonal just mentioned, I kind of completely second that thought. But at the same time, digital native that's one aspect. Digital native companies with coming into, and they have access and they are quite nimble in terms of taking or embedding these aspects of data in their way of working. But for traditional industries, even for that matter, a bank, now 360 customer 360 view is relative. Why I say it's relative, that within the bank there is, for example, within DBS there are consumer group, retail group, there's SME group, there's a private, there's so many parts of the bank which are there. And as a bank, from my perspective, I'm able to just look at data which is inside the bank and have a view completely from that point, that the customer, which is a retail, is also a part of, say, SME or perhaps a corporate. So we need to have that kind of a view, and that is one of the challenges that I think every organization is dealing with. So I think kind of quite second that opinion with Sonal. Yeah.
That's great. One of the questions that's in the, I'm just reading some of the questions and feeds really well into the next theme that I want to talk about is data privacy laws are getting much tighter. Again, there's one country where it's actually going the other direction. We sort of look at China and their openness in sharing all individual data for the benefit of the greater good and so on. But everywhere else, it's becoming much more tighter. So coming to that theme of constraints, right? What's holding you back from the full power, unleashing the full power of hyper-personalized and data monetization? And let's start with regulatory first. I'll ask all three panelists to contribute, and then talk about people and software, right? Because there's this hope and dream and opportunity, but then there's also this constraints that could be a ball and chain as well. So maybe Siang Hou, I'll start with you. You're in healthcare, if I may. This regulatory is very stringent. So
yes.
What's your constraints?
Yes, yeah. Thanks for calling that out, Sundi, because absolutely, we are a heavily regulated industry, right? And so in trying to accelerate data science within the company, right, we do also contribute a lot to the central government's efforts of, like creating this sort of an AI governance framework. right? And we even have, like an AI like ethics officer on our team as well to help, look into issues like that. So you're absolutely right that I think today what we grapple with is the fact that the explainability, right, of AI is very much in question. So even if, like these are insights or recommendations being, provided to an internal audience for them to sort of like take the necessary, say, actions with our customers, they are oftentimes, I think, also, like quite cautious, right, about, say, exactly how have you derived this, right? How does your model decide, what is the next step engagement that I should do with my customer and things like that. So absolutely, I think that is where, like we try to ensure, right, that we have got our own guardrails in place. And that we have, like someone who is on the team, right, being very sensitized to such issues, right, whether it's about, like model bias, like whether it's about, say, like representational harm and things like that, right? Somebody is there to actually advise us on, how exactly we should factor that into the way we execute on our projects. Yep. So, and we work very closely also with our global privacy office, who are, I think, like getting more and more aware also of, like such challenges when it comes to, I think, like just trying to strike a balance between, giving us access to more data that's extremely sensitive, and then making decisions sort of like on the back of, like AI that's built using such data. So yeah, absolutely, that is, the regulation aspect is where I think now we're just trying to really educate like the rest of our enterprise as well.
I think, we could have a post-panel dinner sometime and really double click on this whole COVID trace together elements that's happening in the country and what that means for regulation. But we won't take up time now. We want to do it later. So Vinay, I mean, BFSI or financial services, another highly regulated industry, for a lot of regions from, anti-money laundering and all those elements, know your customer and those sorts of elements. What are you seeing constraints? Are you saying, hey, you know what, we've lived in this world, I know what's going on, it's straightforward?
Yeah, I think, I have, what Siang mentioned is quite, everyone is looking at that aspect of explainability or biasness and all. But I think more than regulation, the bigger challenge to look at is to wrestle with the norm of data. And defining what's wrong or what's not right. I mean, what's right or what's not right kind of thing. The idea that I can walk down with a Google Glass on and know everything about your digital footprint is a bit too creepy, right? I think that challenge of defining social norms and social mores of what makes it okay and what makes it not okay is the one which needs to be addressed, and it completely depends on the business leaders who are like people like us and who are emerging. They will define how this is going to be. See, millennials, for example, are pretty open to share the data, provided we are giving them something in return in terms of some benefits. But the moment you keep millennials aside and look at me, who's not a millennial, I would like to, hold my data and say, no, I don't want to share. So, I mean, these are something that these are the challenges, I would say, not constraints, but challenges that needs to be addressed. Yeah.
I think fair point. And Sonal, I'll come to you. I mean, maybe you're sitting there going, hey, I'm startup, right? I live in the gray area, right? I'm neither here nor there, so I'm unconstrained. And that's why I'm going to go after the big folks in my industry. Maybe, I'll throw it to you, unconstrained view, everything good?
So I think as far as regulations are concerned, as long as the use case is well defined, a partnership model works very well again, where we hinge on the partner who has an established line of communication with the SMEs, and they are in turn helping us getting consent to reach out to the right SME. So it's a lot consent based, and that way we kind of circumvent the regulatory aspect. And I think more than that, overall, in terms of regulations, I see that technology will only help and enable the intentions of the leader or the organization. So I think the intentions have to be very clear and compliant, and keeping in view the customer really. And I mean, this sounds cliched, but it is really about seeing, as Vinay also talked about, what is creepy and what is personalized. There's a very fine line, and the use cases and consent. I think I can't emphasize consent enough here, where the use case and consent go hand in hand, and understanding what can be accessed and not accessed plays a very important role. So I think for us, it's no different. I think the only thing about regulations should be from as a principle is, they always have a level playing field for everybody in the economy, and it doesn't create unnecessary, imbalances in how different, let's say a bank or a new startup is playing. I think as long as that's taken care of, everyone should adhere to the basic regulatory principles.
I understand. I think that's a very interesting way of looking at it, right? You get consent, you're clear with the conversation in terms of what the use case is, then it kind of works. I think that's fine. So Siang Hou, I'm going to switch to you, and sort of wrapping up this particular theme is that other constraints that are holding you back, and it's people, talent, maybe software, maybe a few seconds on what else is sort of holding you back from achieving full potential.
I'll just highlight another 2 points, right? One is really around getting accurate and meaningful feedback, right, on the model output that we produce, right? Because I think this is where maybe the idea of human-centric AI comes in, right? What are we optimizing our algorithms towards? Right, I think if you've read this book about the attention economy, right, there's this whole, I think, like controversy around how today a lot of the news outlets are actually quite clickbait, right? Because they are meant to help drive more traffic, help drive more clicks, right? But then again, the question that we have is, sure, I can track that as an engagement metric, right? But is that a good reflection of intention, right? So how do we get from, I think, engagement to intention, so that we have, I think, say a fair amount of confidence, right, that this engagement eventually will translate into, I think, business impact. So that is, I think, one sort of loop that we are trying to close, right? A feedback loop we hope to close, which will enable us, I think, to really, I think, sort of learn from our models, right? A lot better. So that's one. The second challenge I would highlight is actually around how we balance, I guess, the economies of scale with, the unique context that we see. And the reason I say that is because, MSB has got, a global footprint, right? We have close to 70,000 employees around the world. And outside of, the top 9 to 10 markets, we have another 80 markets that in totality we call emerging markets. But clearly all of these markets, right, are at different stages of maturity, right, in their analytics journey. So how then do we, I think, actually try to provide, say, a certain level or a foundation, right, of capabilities, platforms, technologies that will enable them to sort of cover off the last mile themselves and take it a lot further. I think that is the challenge that we are facing today, right? Because that one, I guess, quotable quote that we often go by is analytics models don't scale like mobile apps. So it's not like, Netflix, if I wanted to roll it out in Singapore or in India, I will just, make it available in the App Store in both countries. It's not as simple as that. Yeah, there's a lot of, customization, adaptation that needs to happen on the back end. So I think that is the challenge that we face, right? Between economies of scale and at the end of the day, the, I think, right level of customization that is needed.
Fantastic. I think I'm going to switch gears again, and as we're coming close to the end of the panel, strategy and tactics, right? And I'm going to give each of you a time machine, and I bet everybody in this world would have loved a time machine in 2019 just to jump over to 2022, not even 2021. But the point is this, the cliches are all known, never waste a crisis, who kicked up a digital transformation, or, it's COVID, whatever. And what would you have done differently, right? What were you doing in 2019 what are you doing differently now that you're in the middle of a pandemic, right? And you're three different organizations looking at different segments. So really, if you can give us some insights or one or two insights on that, just stepping back in time machine coming forward. So why don't I start with you, Sonal? Looking at a startup, it's always interesting to be a part of a startup in a pandemic. So
yeah. So I think what we will continue to focus on would be, or new areas of focus will be, I think the needs are further divided within needs within needs. A sort of if I put it that way, that today we have an understanding of our customers in some key sectors that we operate, but within that, as the pandemic has unfolded, different customers or different segments have been hit differently. So there is probably a need to focus more on with hyper personalization, there will be hyper segmentation in a way. So I think that aspect I would see getting highlighted more and more, where we would need to understand in a more fine print our own SME base as we understand today will stand differently. What we would have done differently, I think perhaps with little control on how the pandemic unfolds, I think we would have probably focused more on not worrying about what is not in control as a startup, and just focusing probably on building more and more of internally organizing ourselves and building more on the capabilities than focusing on things that we didn't have control on. But I think that would be any crisis of this nature. In hindsight, that would be an area.
Thank you. So Vinay, DBS, much larger financial services, out of Singapore. What have you done differently, or what are you doing differently as part of the pandemic?
As I mentioned earlier, our journey around this started way back in first half of the decade. So honestly speaking, from engagement point of view, personalization, this area point of view, we have not been, I wouldn't say we have been impacted, that greatly, because luckily for us, fortunately for us, we have been working on decisioning engine, which is a combination of, different models and it is integrated with our engagement channels, so digital channels and so on and so forth. So when this pandemic kind of hit us, Singapore as well, so it already started reacting in a way and started engaging the customers, and in a way that we found that there are customers suddenly who have started spending less but investing more. The investments are around traditional units rather than going very equities and all. So a lot of things were checked by the model, and we started engaging our customers accordingly. So that has been the thing. But having said that, we are looking at and we understood one challenge, that it is not just a local arbitration. We need to have some, or use case level arbitration, but we need to have a algorithm level or global arbitration to ensure it is not just one thing which gets continuously pushed, or customers are being engaged with certain kind of things. So we are working on that. So there's a lot of investment which is being done towards improving and simplifying journey, building the digital asset, and removing customer toil, and we'll continue to do so in the near future.
Awesome. So Siang Hou, over to you. Wrapping, 30 seconds because we're on time. What would you have done different from a healthcare perspective for the pandemic, apart from what WHO says? Yeah.
Right. I think it's definitely a lot around change management, right, and building that trust in AI. The case in point is Trace Together, right? We all, should applaud that app that has been developed. And yet, I think there are a lot of concerns around, how exactly is the government actually going to make use of this data that being collected. It's all, for the good, right, of containing the pandemic. But then might it get misused? So I think, you know, like this trust issues that a lot of people have with what they don't understand is what I think we could, you know, and I mean, probably in the past and even now going forward, right, we should invest like more of our efforts into. And also, I think from sort of like a practitioner, data science practitioner viewpoint, I guess like one aim that we should all go for is how can we shorten the time to insights. So I think there is a lot of data that's being, you know, like collected. Now we're trying to fix, you know, the storage issues, the warehousing issues. But then how do we get from that to, you know, the final insights, decisions and actions? I think that is what a lot of, you know, like companies might struggle with, right? How can they actually just, you know, enable themselves to just move faster, I think, and, you know, like get more value out of all the data that they're capturing. So, yep, those are two things I think we should focus on.
Thank you. I think I thoroughly enjoyed speaking to you, wonderful folks. I learned a lot from the panel. Hope that the audience did. So really, really appreciated time. And thank you very much. A set of questions I think we didn't get to, but absolutely we'll get that answered as well. So thank you very much for your time. And now I'll hand over to Winston for the next session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sundi and the panelists. Great insight.